Today we'll be working on Puppeteer-Cluster. So Puppeteer-Cluster is a pool that lets you run multiple Puppeteer instances. So it's very useful if you want to basically scale your Puppeteer application or API. So I suggest we start by creating our repository. So let's create a new one. Let's call it Puppeteer-Cluster tutorial. We can put a README and a license if you want. Then you can go and create your repository and open your repo in your favorite code editor. For me, it is Visual Studio Code. I already have a server.js file created. You can create one if you want. Then we are going to initialize on the current line our project. So let's do npm init-y. So it's gonna respond to all the questions automatically. Then we're gonna actually install Puppeteer. Well, as you can see, you need to firstly install Puppeteer and then to install Puppeteer-Cluster. So Puppeteer and Puppeteer-Cluster. And we'll also look at how to implement plugins such as Puppeteer Extra, plugin Stealth, with Puppeteer-Cluster, because that can be important. So the next thing we're going to do when this is finished, it's going to take a bit of time. Okay, let's do a git ignore file, and let's put the node modules and the environment files, which could be useful. So now what we're going to do is firstly initialize our Puppeteer-Cluster program. So the first thing you need to do, as you can see right there, is to basically require Puppeteer-Cluster with this object, which is cluster. So we can just copy this here. Then there's this function. So as you can see, there's firstly this asynchronous function, which is not surprising. Secondly, we can see here that there is this launch option. So you have different concurrency method. So you can see all of them right there. So there's concurrency page. So basically it's one page for each URL. They share everything, cookies, local storage, etc. There's also a concurrency context. So these are different incognito page. So there's no shared data, but it is on the same browser instance. And there's finally concurrency browser. So there's basically one browser for each URL, and there's no shared data. So we can basically create our function, which we're going to call it scrape. Scrape equals to async, and then let's do our await cluster launch with concurrency and max concurrency. So const cluster equals to await cluster at launch, and then we'll have concurrency, which we're gonna do for this time concurrency context, because this is I think the best one for this type of situation. Then the max concurrency is basically how many instances do you want to run at the same time. So we can put 2. Let's put 2. Then, as you can see, there's basically a cluster task, and there's a cluster queue. So basically, the cluster queue is gonna put some URL in the queue, and then they will be executed by default with the cluster task function, where you can also pass data to it. So here it's the URL. There's also the cluster execute, which do it right away basically, and doesn't wait for well, you don't have to wait after. And then finally we have the await cluster idle, and so basically it means when all the queue is finished, and the await cluster close, so it closes all the brother instances. So we can copy that because this is quite important. We are also going to use this cluster task right here. So as we can see, we have the URL right there. What we can also do with the cluster queue, so right there, it's is to put a for loop basically. So imagine we have something like that. For let e equals to 0, e inferior to whatever 10, and e plus plus. Oh my god. Then we're gonna queue cluster queue http google.com, and here it's just taking a screenshot basically. But we can also pass basically here, pass directly the URL, and here pass the iteration variable right there. And then what we can say is, so go to, we can also put here wait until network idle 2, so basically wait until the page is fully load. And then here what we can do is console log page then e, and so normally it should appear 10 times if we run that. npm node server.js. Okay, so there's a little problem, is that we didn't actually say call the function, which is problematic, of course. So node server.js, and now it should run everything. So let's wait a bit. What we could also do here, so as you can see, it's running all these things, and at page 10 it should just close the cluster. What you can also pass as an option, which is quite interesting, is Puppeteer. So let's see, it's here, so you have the Puppeteer options, so you can basically specify all the usual Puppeteer options that you have when you're using the vanilla Puppeteer. So for example, headless mode, which is quite interesting. So let's just put Puppeteer options right there. Here we're going to say, so you create an object, you can say headless to false in order to see your brother instances. You can also specify the arguments. So for example, I like to specify no sandbox, because this is actually very useful when deploying to any platform such as Heroku. And also, if you want to basically use the Puppeteer plugins, so for example, there's Puppeteer extra plugin itself, so right there, which is used commonly with Puppeteer in order to be less detected. Well, you can firstly install it with Puppeteer Extra. We can do it right there. Okay, and once this is installed, what you are going to do is basically using the add extra functions of Puppeteer Extra. So this is a very useful function. So if we go there, add extra Puppeteer Extra. So this is going to allow us to basically add extra plugins and add also, well, the cluster. So maybe we can sit there, yeah. So as you can see, you basically import also the Puppeteer, the vanilla Puppeteer, so we'll need to install that, Puppeteer. And then you require the add extra, and you can then require a plugin. So this is anonymize user agent, and then you can basically add extra the vanilla Puppeteer, but also use anonymize using this method, which is quite efficient, basically with Puppeteer-Cluster. So what we're going to do is require Puppeteer vanilla. So this is the base, the normal Puppeteer. Then we're gonna require the const stealth plugin. This is not what I want. It's extra plugin stealth. Okay, and once we're there, so there's also the Puppeteer cluster which is required. Then we're going to say const Puppeteer equals to add extra vanilla Puppeteer, and then we're going to say Puppeteer that use stealth plugin and Puppeteer that use plus we don't need, I think, cluster right there. Because we're gonna pass basically the Puppeteer this thing, so the variable Puppeteer, into our launch options, and normally if we did it right, it should work. So let's try if there's no error. Well, let's just say node server.js. So there's actually an error. Oh yeah, because yeah, now there should be no error. So node server.js. Let's see. Yeah, so it basically runs, as you can see, all the incognito page, and it is using Puppeteer stealth in order to be less detected by anti-bot systems. So let's just wait, and we see that all the pages have been run, and I have been run using the stealth plugin. So you can use whatever plugin you want using, well, firstly by require it right there, and then use the Puppeteer use method, which is very, very efficient when using Puppeteer-Cluster. The thing I also wanted to show you is the execute method, which is quite different from the queue method. So if we say, for example, max concurrency to 10. Let's see what it does. So as you will see, it will basically create all the browser instances at the same time, and then it will, oh, so there were actually an error message. Target closed, original message, async on plugin, extra plugin. So there was actually an error with the Puppeteer extra plugin stuff. So I don't know why. Maybe it is because there's too much concurrency. But anyway, the execute method, as you can see, allows you to directly execute all the functions right there. And if you actually pass a console log right there, console log finished, with the execute, it will firstly execute all of the for loop, and then it will console log finished. Whereas if you use Q, then it will basically put into Q the functions, and it will say finished before the queue is actually empty. So this is the main difference between the two. So as you can see, Puppeteer-Cluster can be very useful to scale your application. It can also be used with other concurrency method, which can be quite interesting. And it can be used on behalf of Puppeteer Extra and its plugin. So this is also very good actually, because you can basically develop the same app as you would with vanilla Puppeteer. So yeah, thank you for having watched this video about Puppeteer cluster. I hope you enjoy and see you for the next video.